Welcome back, ScreenRanters. Phase 4 is the next big section of the MCU, which some fans are less fussed about. That group saw Avengers Endgame and the characters that left as a sign of bad times arriving in Marvel. One of the ways to help combat that perception is to bring in two of the biggest teams in Marvel Comics, the X-Men and Fantastic Four. We're going to explore how Marvel may do just that, as well as go over who and what those teams are. So strap on your Infinity Gauntlet and let's get started. The year was, well, last year, 2019. Disney purchased 21st Century Fox. As a result, the Marvel characters that Fox had the film rights to were defaulted back to Marvel/Disney. But Disney saw the situation as two birds, one stone. Now the Fantastic Four and the X-Men could arrive in the MCU at any moment. Now for a pop culture history lesson. Fox got the rights to these characters all the way back in the late 90s. At the time, the comic industry was collapsing. Just before, a lot of people were buying up loads of comics, all because they believed comics would be worth a fortune in the future. While some are, that's not the case in this situation. With the big rise in comics being sold, publishers like Marvel and DC were rubbing their hands together and cackling. They started imagining jumping into pools of gold coins like Scrooge McDuck. To keep up with the demand, the big two publishers were printing many copies of their issues. However, since so many people were buying these comics, they actually devalued them to the point that they were worth very little. So they suddenly stopped purchasing comics. Now Marvel and DC were printing so many comics but getting little back. Their money boat was leaking coins and slowly sinking into the depths of oblivion. At the time, DC was owned by Warner Brothers, so they were fine. They had parents to bail them out. Yet Marvel were not owned by Disney then. They were all by their lonesome, so they began the journey into bankruptcy. To avoid shutting down, they started to sell off the film rights to their characters to make some cash. That's how Fox got the X-Men and Fantastic Four. The MCU is a strange place at the moment. After Avengers Endgame and the end of Phase 3, the whole landscape has changed. Longtime characters Iron Man and Captain America have both left the Avengers for different reasons. Black Widow is also gone. Well, depending on if anything changes those proceedings in her solo film, we're set to have a host of new characters brought into the MCU fold, such as the Eternals and Shang Chi. But it does open up the possibility of breaking up the status quo further with some of the most celebrated teams in Marvel's history. Let's explore the first family of Marvel, the Fantastic Four. The Fantastic Four have popped up on the silver screen 3 times: 2005's Fantastic Four, 2007's Rise of the Silver Surfer, and 2015's reboot Fantastic Four, or Fan-4-Stick if you're nasty. Most of their films have been slammed critically. The worst of the bunch was the 2015 reboot. It barely made its budget back at the box office, so rebooting the franchise again in the MCU wouldn't be any loss. First way to bring the team into the MCU is using the broken landscape of the universe. After Thanos caused the blip, a lot of people will be worried about threats from space. Governments will throw money at space exploration. That's how the Fantastic Four go up into the void and come back with their powers. The cosmic rays could even be the result of the Eternals, the Guardians of the Galaxy, or Thor frolicking about in space. Second way is a little cheap, but it's a possibility. With the multiverse being teased in Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home, a different universe could be located.
I'm sorry, you're saying there's a multiverse?
With Doctor Strange's film seemingly involving the multiverse and Loki's Disney Plus show doing something similar, either of them could find the Fantastic Four on their travels. For whatever reason, they bring the Fantastic Four into the MCU. Perhaps their universe is being destroyed by the Beyonders or Celestials. It could also bring in the Council of Reeds. If that sounds familiar, the idea was parodied in Rick and Morty with the Council of Ricks. Thirdly, the rumor for Black Panther 2 is that the villain to Wakanda will be Dr. Doom. Perhaps in the 5-year blip, Doom has been consolidating power like a bear before hibernation. After the devastation, he may attempt to take advantage by attacking the African nation. However, during the same time, the Fantastic Four have already formed with their powers. During the 5 years, the Avengers were spread thin trying to reverse Thanos' actions, so a new team was needed to help the remaining people. With Shuri's intellect, she may know Reed Richards and his history with Doom. She contacts Richards when Doom attacks, so the Fantastic Four lay the smackdown on Doom.
It's clobbering time!
Fourthly, with Tony Stark gone, one of the most intelligent science minds in the world has departed. As a way to memorialize their founder, Stark Industries may create a competition or fund for aspiring scientists. Up steps Reed Richards. He gets the prize money or funding and puts it into his research with cosmic rays, leading to the Fantastic Four getting their powers. Next to get our attention is the House of Ideas mutants, the X-Men. The X-Men get their abilities from something known as the X gene. It's usually dormant until it's triggered at adolescence or during an extremely stressful event. Due to being born with powers, the public hates them. They're also scared of mutants as they're seen as the next step in evolution. So it makes Homo sapiens kind of redundant. But the public are okay if your genes are mutated by a radioactive spider or you take a chemical concoction and dress yourself in the colors of a nation's flag. It's weird. As for their Fox film franchise, it was mostly successful, except X-Men Origins Wolverine. That one was just that's just the worst. Most of the films have been successes at the box office. Overall, Fox made 12 films under the X-Men umbrella. It started in 2000 with X-Men and ended in 2019 with The Dark Phoenix. You may have noticed we didn't mention Deadpool. If you did notice, give yourself a gold star. Well, there's a reason why we left him out. It's unlikely that Deadpool will be included when the X-Men first come into the MCU. Firstly, Wade Wilson isn't a mutant exactly. His body was forced to mutate through experiments based on Wolverine's DNA. As a result of the mutation not coming naturally, he's not technically a mutant, but a mutate. But he has been on the team from time to time. Due to the massive commercial and critical success of the Deadpool films, Disney will likely feel that they already have another franchise ready to go. All they need to do is allow the Deadpool films to keep its more mature content and let it spread its Disney wings. The X-Men and Wade Wilson may interact later down the line, but for now, they can probably be kept separate. The X-Men could be introduced into the MCU in a number of fun ways. Of course, we have the same situation as the Fantastic Four, the multiverse shenanigans that cause the mutants to escape into the MCU. They could also use a mutant that has the ability to jump through dimensions, such as magic. But fear not, we have other ideas to get the creative juices flowing. During the blip, the X-Men could have formed in secret. With all the attacks happening on Earth from the Chitauri, Ultron, and Thanos, radiation could have affected the populace. Thus, mutants pop up. Another idea is that when Hulk snapped his fingers, he may have created the X-Men by mistake. As he snapped, the X gene activates in people across the globe. So, Xavier sets up a school in Westchester with mutant-powered people. Perhaps Marvel will take inspiration from the current comic series headed by Jonathan Hickman. For this idea, the mutants have been living in secret on the island of Krakoa, like a nation of sorts. As the Earth keeps getting battered by baddies, the X-Men may expose themselves to the world in order to save it. They might also sell the humans magical plants that cure everything. The Disney Plus show The Falcon and the Winter Soldier is said to examine governments that are attempting to replicate the process that created Captain America. One of those to experience that in the comics was Wolverine. That was how he got his adamantium skeleton. With Deadpool's powers being the cause of attempting to replicate Wolverine, he too could be introduced this way. It all connects. At the moment, the MCU has a void of A-list heroes. Before Iron Man was one of the first characters in the MCU, he wasn't considered an A-list hero. In the film's development, Marvel were worried people would think Iron Man was about a robot. Luckily, Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of the character turned Iron Man into a known human A-lister.
Please, no gang signs. No, throw it up, I'm kidding.
With that success, this might be what the intentions are for the next batch of characters in Phase 4. However, the MCU is a different entity since Downey's debut. It may not be possible to replicate the situation of bringing in a lesser-known character and elevating them to the upper tiers naturally. On top of that, Endgame broke so many box office records, a lot of fans aren't feeling as invested in the next phase. Many saw the departure of Downey, Chris Evans, and Scarlett Johansson as the end of an era, even perhaps the demise of the franchise. Marvel may want to reverse those thoughts by including some of the biggest names of their comics. There was loads of fanfare when Disney got the film rights back. Delaying on their inclusion could hinder the excitement, so there's no better time than bringing in some big guns in the form of the X-Men and Fantastic Four, especially with Disney Plus shows being a valuable option for them with Marvel properties. Marvel could use Phase 4 as a testing ground for the future, build up the stories of the lesser-known characters, but then slip in the groundwork of the well-known Fantastic Four and X-Men for Phase 5, such as Easter eggs or end credit scenes. Then, we bring the two powerhouses in properly with confetti and celebration. And that's a wrap. Are you excited about the news of what's going to be in Phase 4 or not so much? Speak your minds in the comments below. If you haven't already, subscribe and click that little bell. That way, you'll be personally invited to view new content when we release it. Finally, thanks for joining us today. Later, Mutator.